Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, which is dedicated to the key lessons for delivering effective climate action via the voluntary carbon market. I am your host, Violet George. I'm a journalist with the Carbon Herald, and it's an honor to be here with you today. Joining us also is Tom King, head of carbon solutions at Abatable, and we will be also speaking to Christos Tsaprounis, who is Auto Trader's people and culture director. Now, as we know, the carbon market is a pragmatic tool that can be used to deliver planet-wide impact today and steer climate finance to where it's needed the most, but it's certainly not a straightforward terrain to navigate. And organizations more often than not will require guidance and assistance in choosing the right pathway to achieve these goals. So in the next hour, Tom, representing Abatable, will be discussing the main approaches that organizations can take to support climate projects, as well as some of the most important things to consider when procuring carbon credits. And Christos, on the other hand, representing Auto Trader, will also be sharing some of their experience engaging in the market. We'll also touch on things like what to look out for with carbon pricing and things like that. At the end of our discussion, we'll have a few minutes left to our speakers to answer questions from the audience. So viewers and listeners, we do greatly encourage you to ask your questions in the chat as they come up, and we'll try and go over most of them towards the end of the webinar. Now, without further ado, Tom, I'd like to pass the word on to you, and you can tell us about the different pathways available to businesses and organizations for them to make their climate contributions.
Thank you very much, Violet, and thanks everyone else for joining today's webinar. So yeah, Violet's very kindly done an introduction to us all. I won't recap on that. And before we get into the discussion, I'm going to spend 2 minutes tops, I promise, just to give a quick introduction to Abatable, who we are, and why we're here. And then we'll be talking, as Violet says, about the different pathways for supporting climate projects and how carbon credits can be integrated into that. So first and foremost, at Abatable, we offer a breadth of solutions to help corporates or investors deliver high impact climate action. So we work with Auto Trader, we work with Christos and his team. We also work with companies like EY, Chanel. Recently, well, the last couple of months, we were also the carbon partner to the Paris Olympics. And we work with these companies really in 3 different ways. First, on carbon sourcing. So Abatable has an innovative sourcing platform. We use that to help companies find the right carbon projects from the market, and there's around 10,000 plus out there, and support them end to end through identification of these projects, through quality assessing, through transaction structuring, and all the way to actually then completing a transaction. We also support with market intelligence. I'm guessing a few of you on this call have been in the market for a while. I'm sure all of you can attest to the fact that the carbon market is a complex market. It's ever evolving. So our market intelligence is really there to help inform and help those companies navigate the market. So we look at key topics such as country policy development, as quality, pricing, and others. And then finally, strategy and advisory. So here we support companies in building their carbon procurement strategies to ensure they have confidence that it will deliver high impact climate action. And we provide all of these services through a mix of innovative tech platforms, and we have an incredible team of analysts, of experts, the real brains within Abatable in our offices. If anyone's interested in understanding more about these, this is a very quick snapshot on that, then please follow up after the webinar. But today's focus is really on the right-hand side and discussing the different pathways for supporting climate projects via the VCM. And before we go into the different pathways, I think it's really important for us to understand the role of carbon credits. Now, there's a lot of guidance out there, and that guidance is still evolving in terms of how we should use carbon credits, particularly in relation to the different types of scopes of emissions, so scopes 1, 2, and 3, or the different types of credits that are available and how they should be used and when they should be used. We're not going to touch on that. That's a massive topic in itself. It's probably warrants a whole nother webinar. But one thing we see consistently across the guidance is this use of or this kind of dual role of carbon credits. And just to illustrate this, this chart on screen is a simplified net zero strategy, just to orientate us. So on the top there, above the horizontal line, these are companies' corporate emissions. So in light green, these are emissions which can be easily abated. So ones that can be reduced fairly cost effectively or relatively easily. Those in dark greens are ones that are harder to abate, either because it's just very costly to do so, or it's really impossible with today's technology. And then linking that with carbon credits, below the line. So looking on the right-hand side, and this is really where the sort of dual role of carbon credits comes in. On the right-hand side, those in light blue, these are credits that can be used to neutralize or counterbalance, some different language here, counterbalance emissions that really cannot be abated by a target date. Again, these neutralized credits are the ones that should really only be used once all effort's been put to abate emissions and reduce operational emissions. And then we have the dark blue, or beyond value chain contribution credits. And this is where companies really go above and beyond the minimum. This is where there's more flexibility, there's more scope for companies to define a strategy. And we see particularly the more ambitious companies setting their own targets that support projects they really believe in or really link to their operations. So now looking at the different pathways that companies can take, and this ranges, we have kind of four in mind, and this really ranges from the least ambitious pathways or the highest risk ones, as we see, to the most ambitious or least risk. And starting with what we call climate neutral. So climate neutral, this is a pathway which really has limited focus on decarbonizing. So a company isn't really doing everything they can to reduce their operational emissions, and they're really just using carbon credits to offset that. Again, we see this as a high risk, high greenwashing risk. Carbon credits absolutely should not be used just to sort of compensate lack of activity elsewhere. So really, this is not an approach that Abatable would advocate for. But then moving to more ambitious pathways and looking at net zero. So on the left-hand side of the second chart, these are using credits to neutralize those unabatable emissions by a target year. Or the third chart, where we're using carbon credits to really offset all residual emissions up towards that target year. So true net zero. And then finally, there's climate positive. And this is the most ambitious strategy. This is about focusing on reducing emissions first and foremost, but then compensating that plus additional emissions through carbon credits. And I mean, a spoiler alert, the Auto Trader sits in this camp, and we'll be hearing more about this from Christos later. Again, that's a very quick snapshot. If anyone's more interested in understanding more about these approach ways or the other steps that we recommend in building a science-aligned carbon procurement strategy, we have a guide. I'm sure we're going to be sharing a link afterwards if anyone's interested, or alternatively, just get in touch. And then finally, before I hand back to Violet and Christos, I just wanted to leave some thoughts around why we believe it's really important that companies build a carbon procurement strategy today. And first and foremost is about the current emissions gap that we have. The voluntary carbon market is absolutely a key way of us hitting net zero. It's part of the critical path. And just the longer we wait, the harder it's going to be to close the emission gap that we see right now. Currently, we estimate it to be around 15 gigatons annually. The longer we wait, the higher that number goes, and the harder it's going to be to reduce that. So we're simply not decarbonizing fast enough. We're currently not doing enough to close that gap. And so really leaving kind of thoughts for everyone on this call. Are you feeling like you're really doing enough here? Is there more your business could do? Is there more they could do faster? Secondly, internalizing carbon liabilities to drive emission reduction action. And what we mean here is using internal budgets for carbon credits as a way to really create awareness and focus on the importance of decarbonizing. And there's been studies done that those that create carbon budgets, it really incentivizes the whole business to focus on how can they decarbonize first before they start looking at carbon credits. And then finally, about safeguarding against future credit supply shortage and price increases. And here, I mean, as we near 2030 or 2035, and a lot of the companies' commitments come into play, we're going to see an increase in demand for carbon credits. And so we really encourage companies to start building strategies now, planning now to lock in that future supply and also protect themselves against escalating pricing that we see. So I just want to leave you all with those 3 points. Again, please think about whether you think you're taking these into consideration today within your business. And again, if anyone's interested in following up and discussing some of these areas further, then please get in touch after the webinar. So now I'll pass back to Violet and Christos.
Thank you, Tom. And I'll hand it back over to Christos because we'd love it for you to share the outline of Auto Trader's sustainability strategy with us.
Sure. Hello, everybody. Yes, just a few things about Auto Trader, just in case you don't know about us. So Auto Trader is the leading digital platform, and we've got the biggest audience of vehicle buyers, and we're connecting them with everyone in the UK that sells vehicles. We are a technology business that sits very comfortably across the tech and automotive industry. We employ about 1,200 people. And the interesting thing about our environmental strategy is that actually it was created very gradually from the ground up in a way. So it was mobilized very early on, about 8 years ago, by our sustainability network. It's one of our employee networks that's very active and very passionate about the impact that we have on the environment. And through the years, our environmental strategy is something now that is a lot more developed and is supported by the senior leadership and our board as well. So our strategy is about putting the brakes on carbon, and you can see there's sort of like the automotive there flavor, and the objective of it is to minimize the impact that we have on the environment, both to protect our business when it comes to the impact of climate change, as well as doing what we need to do as a responsible business. And as Tom said, going beyond that and hopefully having a positive impact on climate change. We're not focusing only on our own operations and our supply chain, but we take our position in the industry very seriously, and the fact that we do have a voice in our industries. And we can influence actually the automotive industry and support everyone in that industry so that how they transition into the low carbon economy. It has mainly 3 pillars, our environmental strategy. The first pillar is about getting our house in order. We have made a commitment to be a net zero business by 2040, and we've signed up with the Science Based Target Initiative, and we've got both our targets and our carbon reduction pathway verified. And the things that we're doing around that are multiple things. And I think Tom alluded to it already, that no carbon removal strategy should in any way be used as an excuse so that you don't reduce your own carbon emissions. I mean, signing up part of SBTI and being through net zero actually means that you need to reduce your own carbon emissions. But it's very important that you concentrate on that, as well as, in our case, at the same time, concentrating on the carbon removal market. So we do loads of things. I'm not going to go into detail about what we do, but We make sure when it comes to our offices and how our offices are run and the renewable energy in our offices, but also making sure that we consume energy in an efficient and responsible way. We've migrated. We're a technology business. We are a lot of the carbon emissions are related to our data centers, so we moved all our data centers to the cloud. We've installed solar panels in some of our offices. We're working towards switching our company car fleet to EV. And the great thing about all our efforts is that because we have such a strong engagement across the business, a lot of the work is being done by the majority of the people employed by Autotrader. They keep coming up with ideas of how we're going to reduce our carbon emissions, and our sustainability network needs to take the credit for all that, because they're an amazing group of people that has really made sustainability part of our culture. It's not something that just a sort of like a subset of people working in the team is doing. It's really a company wide initiative which is helping a lot. Then the second pillar is all about supporting our industries, and it's a lot of what we do is making sure that we support a lot of the retailers, a lot of the manufacturers, by creating the opportunities for the industry to come together and collaborate, sharing what everyone is doing. We also have invested very heavily in a partnership with the Carbon Literacy Trust. And for those of you that don't know about carbon literacy, it's a day's worth of training that educates people about the climate change. It changes people's hearts and minds, but the most important thing is actually encourages people to take action and make personal commitments about how they're going to be reducing their own and their business's carbon footprint. So we invested in creating a toolkit that's available for free to everyone in our industry, so that they can engage and make sure that the whole of their business is carbon literate, which has been really successful in actually engaging the whole industry and changing the culture of the industry. And we do a lot of work with the government as well, the UK government, utilizing a lot of the data that we have around actually consumer behavior. We are at the heart of the automotive industry, so we have a lot of information about the adoption of low emission vehicles. So we collaborate with the government a lot when it comes to that, so that we can enable the adoption of electric vehicles in particular. And then the third pillar as well is also about how do we support consumers. There's a lot of myth busting to be done about what is the most sustainable vehicle choice that one can make, and we're again in a very good position utilizing our voice. We are the marketplace where the majority of consumers in the UK are coming when it comes to choosing their next vehicle. So we have created an EV hub that gives all the information that you need when it comes to making the right choice for the vehicle for you. And we're doing a lot of education, raising awareness through a lot of our communication channels, so that people can really make the right choice for them, really informed choice for them, and also make sure that we provide some clarity when it comes to a lot of a lot of misinformation that's out there as well in that way. So that's a bit of a summary of our environmental strategy. So, and the three pillars, both about what we do with our own business, our industry, and consumers.
Excellent. And could you also tell us about your initial approach to supporting climate projects and how it evolved into a climate contribution strategy?
Sure. I mean, this wouldn't be no surprise to anyone. I think many years ago, when we first started looking into that, it was all about planting trees. And there's nothing wrong about planting trees as long as, it's done in a sustainable way. I think it's a great way to start and to continue having that as part of your portfolio. Trees are very important for the environment, our neighborhoods. They have so many benefits. But as we developed our strategy, we realized that actually that will not be enough. And planting the occasional tree is definitely not going to be where we stop. So through the years, then we moved into supporting some carbon offset projects as well. The more we looked into the projects, the more we realized that we need to, and as our investment, when it comes to our financial investment, was increasing, we realized that we actually need to form a strategy that is a lot more multifaceted and includes a lot more due diligence when it comes to where we put our efforts in, both when it comes to our financial contribution, but also our efforts in building partnerships with those projects. And it's great actually, because that's when the partnership with Abatable came along, and they provided us with a lot of their knowledge. I'm sure a lot of people in the audience here are finding themselves in very similar positions to myself, but this is a very a developing market. There's loads of information out there that sometimes it's really difficult to know what's right. It requires a very long-term planning as well, because if you look at our ambition to be net zero by 2040, that's quite far in the future. But it's also making sure that we do the right thing and we get that confidence to start acting now. And I think that was a very important objective that we wanted to achieve. So it started with trees, moved to offsets, and then we wanted to actually capture and create a climate contribution strategy that's very much aligned to our environmental strategy. So again, we have those three pillars. So we wanted to make sure that our climate contribution is aligned to that. So our climate contribution strategy focuses on three areas. First of all, the carbon removal projects, and we now concentrate only on carbon removal projects that Abatable has helped us with, to make sure that, first of all, we support those projects now so that they can further develop. And from an auto trader perspective, we're able to have enough carbon credits to make sure that we fulfill our net zero commitments, and hopefully a lot beyond just the minimum requirement for that. The second area is that we wanted to still invest a lot in education and awareness across our industry. So partnerships like the partnership that we have with Carbon Literacy Trust is a key part of our climate contribution strategy. And although that in itself is not necessarily directly providing us any credits, it's still a big part of our climate contribution strategy. And the third one was to make sure that we also, and this is more about the fact that we want to invest in our local communities, to support local community projects that are good for the environment. And a good example of that is the Greater Manchester Green Spaces Fund, that again will not provide us with any carbon credits per se, but as a business that we want to have a positive impact in our local community. Our headquarters is in Manchester. We wanted to make sure that part of our climate contribution strategy is also making sure that we contribute to local community projects as well that are targeting the environment, such as the Green Spaces Fund. So from, as I said, from trees, in a way, full circle towards some trees in the end as well, but with a lot more, I guess, thinking around it and spreading our, both our efforts and our financial contribution across different projects and partnerships.
And what were the criteria for picking the projects that you ended up supporting?
So it does differ a bit when it comes to our climate. When it comes to the carbon credits, and again, Abatable has helped us a lot with that, is first of all, we wanted to make sure that they are credible. Now, how do you actually assess the credibility of a carbon removal project? That is again, a lot more complex, but we looked at things about, who is the developer, doing the due diligence with the developer, what is the permanency of the carbon removal, then we try to use as much as possible a combination of nature-based solutions and technology science-based solutions as well, to make sure that we get a portfolio of different solutions. What's really important for us is the option for us to be able to build a partnership that goes beyond just securing some carbon credits, but how can we actually utilize our voice to actually support those projects and those developers beyond just securing some credits from them. So we did, one of the criteria was to also look at more local in the UK projects that would allow us that opportunity. However, obviously, we know that there's a limit to the UK projects as well. So therefore, now we're looking to expand on that. But yeah, it's the credibility of the project in summary. It's and the opportunity to create a partnership with those projects and potential other co-benefits that the project has beyond carbon removals. But then definitely as part of the due diligence, making sure that they're not having a negative impact on the local environment, the local people, or anything actually that could be worrying.
And what do you think is important? Yes, sorry.
So just jump in, I was on mute, but I think it was also interesting when we were discussing the criteria, because one thing that came up was just the maturity of the technology that we were looking at. Because so we looked across the UK. I think we found around a dozen projects that fit the criteria in the tech CDR space, and there was a number that were very early stage, and it was great that Auto Trader were kind of ambitious in wanting to help some of these younger companies to prove that technology, to start scaling. But I think there was some which were just very, very early stage, which presented too much risk. And it was about sort of calibrating that and finding the projects that were at the right stage where Auto Trader could have a catalytic role but not take on too much risk. So we found a really balanced portfolio of earlier stage projects, some later stage. Christos, I don't know if you were willing to share some of these.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, cool. So just to put some more around this then. So we worked with Carbon Capture Scotland, a biomethane project, and we worked with Undo, an enhanced rock weathering, which was much more of a mature project. Maybe some people on the call know about them. And then we also worked with the Highland Carbon Scottish afforestation project. So as Christos said, a mix across tech and nature base, but also a spread of earlier stage with Carbon Capture Scotland to more mature projects with Undo and Highland Carbon.
Excellent. So moving on to my next question, which was about the what you think the most important things for organizations are to look out for when buying carbon credits.
Yeah, I think it's making sure that you do your due diligence when it comes to the developers behind the projects. I think, utilizing an external consultancy like Abatable is always helpful, especially sort of like as you're starting with your efforts. Don't spread your investment. Don't invest only in one project. If you're able to spread your investment, that's all. Like any other investment strategy as well. That's always prudent to do. And what we are doing is also, as we are, year by year increasing our investment, we're also building relationships with those projects. So reach out to those projects, find out about them. If you're able to sort of like meet them, understand the technology, understand what the developers' ambitions are for the future, how they run the projects. The closer you get to those projects, my advice would be the better it would be, because as part of building those partnerships, you'll also be doing a lot of the the due diligence that you need to do.
Okay, thank you. And what would you say the key learnings from last year are, and how you're applying them in 2024?
Yeah, I think the key learnings is that, I mean, one of the key learnings is that this is such a developing um, area. So if we look at on one side the framework of the SBTI for corporates and how that is developing all the time. So making sure that we keep up to date with the development of that. Looking at the carbon market, it's developing so quickly as well. Not only when it comes to the carbon pricing but also when it comes to the availability of credits in the market, to new players coming in or potentially players not making it. So my biggest learning is to stay very close to this, to have a plan for the future and to make sure that your plan is sustainable, uh, but also to allow some flexibility in your plans because it's such a developing area, that I think staying agile and staying flexible is very important.
On that note, actually, would you mind perhaps sharing if there were any things that didn't go as planned, as they often do?
I mean, so far at this point that we where we are, I think the only thing that hasn't materialized is the partnership opportunities with some of the more local projects that we have here in the local community. We were hoping that there'll be a lot more opportunities to create volunteering opportunities for our employees, but smaller projects in our experience. Tend to be run by volunteers, and many times when corporates want to support them in that way, it can be a bit overwhelming for those projects. I don't think it's something that's not gone well, but maybe something that we didn't realize of that potential for volunteering opportunities for our people hasn't really come to fruition.
Okay, and so what's next for you? What's the long-term sustainability journey?
So it's focusing a lot on our climate transition plan this year, and it's building on the plans that we have already. When it comes to making sure that we reduce the carbon emissions of Auto Trader across, beyond our own, across the value chain, uh, making sure that we continue monitoring everything very closely, and increasing all the initiatives that we do in order to make sure that we reduce our carbon footprint. We need to reduce it by 50% by 2030, which is the midpoint, and then by 90% by 2040. And then continue the partnership that we have with the existing projects and building on them, and always being on the lookout for new projects that we can potentially support.
Okay, and Christos, do you plan on communicating these efforts internally and externally? And if yes, then how?
Yeah, I mean, we have a communication plan both internally and externally. We're utilizing both our reports that we issue as a business. We've issued the Road to 2035, which is a report to help the industry when it comes to the transition to low emission vehicles. We're also using the power of storytelling to tell the story of what our people are doing to reduce the carbon footprint of Auto Trader. And coming up very soon, I think it's next week, we have gone to visit one of the projects, Undo, in Scotland. And our colleagues went to see exactly what happens with enhanced rock weathering, and trying to simplify that and showcase what the project is doing to remove carbon from the atmosphere, both internally and externally. It's a great way, actually, through the use of video to just demystify some of this, because the technology is so interesting, but it's also sometimes difficult to understand. Well, for me anyway. So it's, we're trying to bring some of those stories to everyone internally and externally, hoping to inspire some other people to and give some, shine a light to those projects that are doing great work, and help them with their objectives as well.
And where might people be able to see this?
So I think the easiest thing to do is just follow our page on LinkedIn. That's where we tend to share everything. I mean, you can look at our corporate website, but I think following the page on LinkedIn is the easiest thing. That's where we tend to share all our stories. So that's a bit of a shameless plug there for us. But since you asked,
Absolutely, it's very interesting to see how these projects actually work, and videos definitely help. So another thing I wanted to ask you is, what types of companies or industries do you think would have, or perhaps Tom, this is actually more of a question for you. What industries do you think would have the most impact by making climate contributions like this?
Shall I start on that one?
sure.
Yeah, cool. I mean, I think probably depends on how we define climate contributions, but there's certainly companies like Auto Trader, and what I mean by that is businesses with relatively low emission profiles, but probably fairly strong, healthy bottom lines, who can afford to support some of these projects that we mentioned, Carbon Capture Scotland, and even to that extent, undo some of these more innovative technologies to really be proven at scale. And that's a massive contribution to the voluntary carbon market, because it brings down the price per ton to something that's more affordable to the masses. I haven't got the numbers in front of me, but when we look at some of like the most expensive project types like direct air capture, we're often talking about $800 to $1,000 per ton right now. And then you contrast that with some a nature-based afforestation project, which might be around $20, $25, $30 a ton. And then the question is, why should we invest in direct air capture? I mean, direct air capture is very scalable, and the more we invest in it, the more we can bring the technology down that curve and bring it to something that's maybe $200, $150, and just make it much more available for a lot more companies to support. And something like direct air capture, the other benefit is, for those who don't know much about this, the technology, it's where we basically suck carbon out of the atmosphere. It's then usually stored permanently underground. So in terms of permanence that Christos mentioned earlier, it's very, very long term, arguably indefinitely, reduction in carbon from the atmosphere. So these technologies are really, really important. And I see companies like Auto Trader and peers like Microsoft or Salesforce playing such a critical role in contributing to the development of those projects.
Excellent. Now, guys, we have a handful of very interesting audience questions. I assume we won't have time to cover them all, but here's the first one for you. It's, how do the risks associated with the climate positive strategy differ from the climate neutral claims?
Shall I take that one as well?
Yeah, we could,
Please
yeah.
do.
Christos, please jump in if you've got a view on it. I think first and foremost, there's been overuse of like different terminology, climate neutral, climate positive. This is one of the areas that the voluntary carbon market is really, really cracking down on. So when someone says they're climate positive, it is a much stricter definition now. I think it's probably quite easy to think climate positive is just going to be like another buzzword that a lot of brands use to try and sell more products and try and get themselves better known. That's going to be less and less the case. As you saw on the different pathways, climate neutral and climate positive, they were opposite ends of the scale. So climate positive really has to mean every attempt has been made to decarbonize first and foremost, and then carbon credits are used to offset any unabatable emissions plus some. So it's a very different strategy to climate neutral. I think climate neutral is again one of those terms that has recently got a lot of bad press because it's been overused, and there's not been much guidance, much protection around what we really mean by that.
Yeah, if I could add to that, my only thought on that is, I at Auto Trader, we're avoiding making any claims. We actually made a commitment to become a net zero business. Signing up to the SBTI framework, which is a very well, internationally acknowledged framework that has obviously a process, but we're not making any claims of having achieved something that we haven't achieved, or making actually any big claims about what we're going to achieve. We focus on working towards our goal, sharing what we do around focusing on reducing our carbon footprint first and foremost. And we feel that actually that is a more safe, but more importantly, it's a more genuine and authentic approach. We're not making any big claims. The only thing that I would say on that, my final point, is that many times people have stopped talking about this at all, or stopped doing anything in the fear that they're going to be, someone is going to call them out about greenwashing. And that can also be quite negative, and that can actually be, the wrong thing to do. So my advice would be also talk about what you're doing, avoid making big claims about something that you're not certain about, but don't let the fact that you haven't done everything that you can in your business stop you from also sharing in an appropriate way about the things that you're doing, because that's how everyone learns. Think about today, everyone coming here together and learning something, hopefully.
And another question we have from the audience is, what's your view on the credit prices, and how do you expect those to change in time?
I mean, I'm interested to know Christos's view on that, like whether you're thinking as Auto Trader, what's going to happen in the future of prices. And
I mean, yes. I mean,
yeah.
I don't know. I mean, hopefully they will reduce, and they will be just sort of like cheaper, and everyone can invest in more of those projects. Yeah, I think I think it's going to most probably move depending on how the demand for them and the supply for them. I guess pricing is always dictated by that. But I think that a lot of the projects that we're investing in, like rock weathering, for example, has the potential to expand and to really, offer a lot more credits in the market. The one thing to consider is, could you make agreements that secure your prices at the current price in case the prices do go up, and therefore at least you can have some form of predictability when it comes to your financial investment. But I think it's sort of like, I don't know, I think it's most impossible to know. And, luckily, Tom, as the expert, is most probably going to keep a lot more updated around that.
I think, yeah, from a beta board's point of view, I mean, the market has had a difficult time for the last couple of years, and that's definitely put some downward pressure on prices to encourage businesses to still act. But I think what we're seeing is more of a differentiation between high quality and poor quality projects. So those high quality projects, the ones that, I mean, we assess, or there's lots of ratings agencies out there assess those ones that really do what they say and do it well. We're seeing their pricing stay really strong in the market. And when we look forward to like 2, 3, 5, 10 years, there's only a price escalation. And a lot of that is driven by the cost of the project itself, but also the additional asks that are being put on those projects for better monitoring, better reporting, all of these additional costs to that project. So they have to be factored into the cost of the credit. So generally, we're seeing an escalation in price of good quality, and we're seeing a fizz out of poor quality projects, which I think if you look at the market as a whole, maybe looks quite flatlined then. But that's where we see the detail behind pricing.
And another question we have is, do you feel like you achieved a balanced portfolio of technological removals and projects with higher community benefits? Christos, that's one's for you.
Yeah, I mean that is the aim, and I think for the last I mean, this is the second year that we have implemented this climate contribution strategy. But I think yes, we're trying to, both in the financial contribution that we make and the energy that we put behind the different projects. I think you need to have that balance, and I think that's what we're trying to achieve. Carbon removals are, should be part of your portfolio. That's why we invest in them. But as I said, there's a lot of community projects across our local communities in Greater Manchester and London, where we're mainly based, that have no carbon removal element. But because they have a good community element, especially when it comes, if you think about the quality of the air, the community element of bringing people together in green spaces and offering, more green spaces for our cities, which has big impact on, everyone's mental health, that sense of community, a space for people to come together. We, when it comes to our education awareness, with our big partnership with carbon literacy that has now been going on for more than 6 years. So we've balanced our portfolio. It's not only about carbon removals. It's actually spread across all these different projects that have all these different benefits as well. So I'm not sure if we have the perfect balance, but this is definitely the objective.
Can I follow this up with another question to you, Christos, which is, recently we've been talking about projects outside of the UK. You set this challenge, right? You said, we're interested to know what else is out there in the world. And I'm interested to know how you're thinking about balancing the benefits of looking beyond the UK, i.e. maybe there's better projects, more impactful projects, with those projects not being as directly related to your operations.
Yeah, it's a very interesting one. I guess, and that's the beauty of having a portfolio of projects. And combining all these projects, not only with carbon removals, but also the other community projects, because then you're able to actually diversify your portfolio and look at projects outside the UK. There's some very interesting projects happening, in Europe and further afield as well, with loads of benefits. We don't want to restrict ourselves too much. We all share a planet, and we need to look after the whole planet. As long as we have projects that we can also achieve some of the engagement objectives that we have, and creating that more local partnerships, we're more comfortable now to look at projects further afield as well.
Okay, and one final question, I guess, is what project types represent interest for you, and have you looked at things like regenerative agriculture?
And not specifically, although, I mean, all projects, to be honest, all projects are of interest to us. And, we, as we build our portfolio, we are looking at all the different projects that become available. When it comes to agriculture, obviously the rock weathering has a good impact on agriculture. And when we went to visit the project, we spoke to some farmers, and to make sure that the impact that actually it's having from their perspective is a positive one. But we haven't looked at any more projects around that. But it's very important. I guess going back to my point of what I made earlier, the closer you get to those projects, you're able to actually understand the impact that they have on the local communities and the people that are utilizing them. In the case of rock weathering, the farmers that are utilizing them to make the land more fertile.
Okay, Tom, would you like to add anything to that?
I think it's a bit of reflection is perhaps working with a mortar trader, but maybe others as well. Is that I think a lot of companies stepping into the market for the first time and setting their criteria, it's quite tempting to set your first kind of project type criteria as like which projects are near me. It feels like a fairly obvious place to start, but we'd really encourage anyone looking at the voluntary carbon market to really think about what is their priority in terms of impact, i.e., is it about social benefits? Is it about biodiversity benefits? Is it about quality? Is it about operational like relevance? And then therefore like local projects would be more important. So I'd really encourage like that as an open conversation rather than kind of coming into the market going, this is what I want, just staying open-minded.
Excellent, guys. Tom, Christos, thank you both for sharing your insights with us today and for giving us a pretty good look at what executing a climate strategy looks like. I tried my best to keep track of what you guys were talking about and take some of the key moments out. First and foremost, I think we have the different pathways for climate impact, which is obviously the leading theme of this webinar. And these range from like the least impactful and the kind of easiest to implement, which are the low risk, so to say, the climate neutrality claims, which are more prone to greenwashing claims and are generally not something Abatable recommends getting involved with. And then you have the opposite end of the spectrum where strategies are more impactful and a bit more difficult to implement, but where essentially they achieve sufficient value chain abatement and neutralization, and also have outstanding VCM. So with that in mind, I gather that having a balanced portfolio of carbon removals and projects that are highly involved with communities and beneficial to communities is key to implementing a successful climate strategy. I see that we have several other questions in the Q&A, but unfortunately we won't have time to answer them. However, we will include those in a blog post shortly, probably today, maybe tomorrow. There will be a link for that. There will be a recording of this webinar available on Abatable's YouTube channel, if I'm not mistaken. And I think that's a wrap pretty much on our end. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Violet. Thanks, Christos. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Goodbye.